Jake Martinez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished fixing the broken air filter in Section B. The Unity Prime space station was old and constantly breaking down. As the main engineer, Jake spent most of his days crawling through tight spaces and replacing parts that should have been changed years ago. He was walking back to his quarters when he heard a strange sound coming from the main corridor. Jake looked around the corner and saw something that made his blood run cold. A tall, thin alien in dark clothes was pointing a weapon at Lord Vexthul, one of the most important Kaltharan nobles visiting the station. Jake did not think. He just acted. He grabbed a heavy tool from his belt and threw it as hard as he could. The tool hit the assassin in the arm, making him drop his weapon. The alien stumbled and ran away before station security could catch him. Lord Vexthul stood up slowly, his purple skin darker than usual. His long arms brushed dust from his expensive robes. Jake had never seen a Kaltharan noble up close before. They were much taller than humans, with skin that changed color based on their emotions. Right now, Vexthul looked very angry. "You," Vexthul said, pointing at Jake with one of his 3 fingers. "Human, you interfered." Jake was confused. He had just saved the alien's life. "Sir, that person was trying to kill you. I had to help." Vexthul's skin turned an even darker purple. In Kaltharan culture, being saved by someone of a lower species was deeply embarrassing. The fact that a human had rescued him would be talked about in noble circles for years. "I did not need your help," Vexthul lied. "But since you have made this situation, you must be rewarded." Jake felt relieved. Maybe the alien would give him some credits or put in a good word with station management. "I will give you my daughter," Vexthul announced with a cold smile. "What?" Jake asked, sure he had heard wrong. "My daughter Zerathul. She is broken, useless. She cannot walk. Our family has kept her hidden because she brings shame to our name. She will serve you now." Jake stared at the noble. In human culture, giving away your child was unthinkable. "Sir, I can't take your daughter. That's not right." Vexthul laughed, but it was not a kind sound. "Oh, but you will. She arrives tomorrow. Consider it payment for your interference. I think you will find her to be quite the burden." The noble walked away, followed by his guards. Jake stood in the empty corridor, trying to understand what had just happened. He had saved someone's life, and somehow ended up responsible for their disabled daughter. It felt like a punishment rather than a reward. That night, Jake could not sleep. He kept thinking about what Vexthul had said. The way the noble spoke about his own daughter was horrible. No parent should talk about their child like that, especially not about a disability. Jake had a cousin who used a wheelchair, and she was one of the smartest people he knew. The next morning, Jake waited nervously in his small quarters. He had no idea what to expect. He thought about calling station security or speaking to Captain Turner, but technically he had not done anything wrong. The noble said his daughter would serve Jake, not that Jake was keeping her against her will. When the door chimed, Jake opened it to find 2 Kaltharan guards. Between them sat a young female Kaltharan in what looked like a floating chair. She had the same purple skin as her father, but her eyes were different. They held pain and sadness, but also intelligence. "Human Jake Martinez," one guard said, "we present Zerathul, daughter of Lord Vexthul. She is now your responsibility." The guards left quickly, as if they could not wait to be done with their task. Jake and Zerathul stared at each other for a long moment. Neither of them knew that this awkward beginning would change both their lives forever. The silence stretched between Jake and Zerathul for several uncomfortable minutes. She sat in her floating chair, which hummed softly as it kept her suspended above the floor. Her legs were covered by a dark cloth, and her hands rested on her lap. Jake noticed her fingers were long and graceful, moving slightly as if she was nervous. "So," Jake finally said, trying to sound normal, "I'm Jake. I guess you're staying here for a while." Zerathul looked up at him with bright yellow eyes. When Kaltharans were calm, their skin was a light purple, but hers seemed pale and tired. "I know who you are. My father made it clear that I am your burden now. Your punishment for daring to save his life." Jake felt anger rise in his chest. "You're not a burden. And saving someone's life shouldn't be something I get punished for." She laughed, but it was bitter. "Tell that to my father. In our society, being saved by a human is shameful. Having a disabled daughter is even worse. So he kills two birds with one stone, as you humans say." Jake looked around his small quarters. He had one room that served as bedroom, living area, and kitchen. There was a tiny bathroom. It was barely enough space for one person, let alone two, and definitely not designed for someone in a floating chair. "Look, this is awkward for both of us," Jake said, "but we'll figure something out. Are you hungry? I've got some ration packs." Zarathul stared at him like he had grown a second head. "You want to feed me?" "Well, yeah, it's lunchtime. I am here to serve you, not the other way around." Jake shook his head. "I don't want anyone serving me, especially not against their will. Come on, let's eat and talk about this." Over the next few hours, Jake learned about Zarathul's life. She told him how she had been in an accident as a child that damaged her spine. In Kaltharan society, physical perfection was highly valued. Disabled individuals were seen as cursed or broken. Most were hidden away from public view. "I have not left our family home in 5 years," she explained. "My father's greatest shame is that other nobles know he has a damaged daughter." Jake was horrified. "You've been trapped inside for 5 years. What do you do all day?" "I study. I read. I work on mathematical problems. But none of it matters because I cannot walk." "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard," Jake said, then quickly apologized. "Sorry, I didn't mean to insult your culture." "Do not apologize for speaking the truth." The next morning, Jake had an idea. He cleared out his storage closet and set up a small workspace. He brought in a desk, some chairs, and his computer terminal. Then he asked Zarathul to help him with a repair project. "You want my help?" she asked. "I checked the station records. You have degrees in mathematics and theoretical physics. I'm working on upgrading the station's power grid, and the calculations are getting complicated." Zarathul moved her chair closer to the desk. Jake showed her the problem he was trying to solve. Within an hour, she had found 3 errors in his work and suggested a better approach. "How did you do that so fast?" Jake asked. "I have had nothing but time to study," she said, but for the first time since arriving, she looked almost pleased. Over the following days, they worked together more and more. Jake made simple changes to her hover chair, adding better controls and a work surface that could extend from the arm. He noticed that Zarathul's skin was getting brighter, closer to the normal purple color of healthy Kaltharans. Other humans on the station started to notice. Captain Lisa Turner stopped by one afternoon and found them both bent over a technical diagram, arguing about the best way to reroute power systems. "Jake," she said quietly after Zarathul went to rest, "what exactly are you doing here?" "Treating her like a person," Jake replied. "Apparently that's revolutionary." Captain Turner looked thoughtful. "Just be careful, Jake. You're playing with politics you don't understand." But Jake was already learning that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is treat someone with dignity when the whole world tells them they don't deserve it. 3 weeks passed, and Jake found himself looking forward to working with Zarathul every day. She had a way of seeing problems that amazed him. Where he saw complicated engineering puzzles, she saw elegant mathematical patterns. Their biggest breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning. Jake was frustrated with the station's old engines, which used too much fuel and barely kept them moving. He had been trying to improve them for months with no success. "The problem is not the engines," Zarathul said, studying the designs. "The problem is thinking like gravity exists." "But gravity does exist," Jake said, confused. "Not in space. Not really. We are falling constantly, but never hitting anything." Your engines work against an enemy that is not there. She began sketching equations on the computer screen. Her long fingers moved quickly, writing symbols that Jake barely recognized. What if instead of pushing against gravity, we convince gravity to push with us? That's impossible, Jake said, then caught himself. I mean, how? Zarathul worked for hours, stopping only when Jake brought her food. She created models and ran simulations. Slowly, a new type of engine design emerged. Instead of burning fuel to create thrust, it would manipulate gravitational fields to pull the ship forward. This is incredible, Jake said, watching the simulations. The new engine used 90% less fuel and moved 3 times faster than anything currently in use. But will it actually work? There is only one way to find out. Jake spent the next 2 weeks building a small prototype with Zarathul's help. She could not use tools the way he could, but she guided every step of the construction. Her hover chair's small mechanical arms, originally designed to help her eat and drink, became precision instruments under her control. The day they tested the prototype was nerve-wracking. Jake had set up the test in an empty cargo bay, with safety barriers all around. If something went wrong, it could destroy half the station. Are you sure about this? Jake asked. Mathematics does not lie, Zarathul said. But mathematics sometimes forgets important details. Jake activated the prototype. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the small device began to glow with a soft blue light. It lifted off the table and floated in the air, completely silent. It works, Jake whispered. Of course it works, Zarathul said, but her skin had turned bright purple with excitement. Word of their success spread quickly through the station. Scientists and engineers came to see the impossible little engine that floated without fuel. Some were amazed. Others were suspicious. How do we know this is not some Caltheran trick? Asked Dr. Peterson, the chief science officer. Because Caltherans do not share their technology with humans, Captain Turner replied. And certainly not through a disabled girl that her own father threw away. The test results were undeniable. The gravitational engine worked perfectly. It was clean, efficient, and revolutionary. Within days, scientists from across the sector were asking for detailed reports. Jake and Zarathul were invited to present their discovery at the Interspecies Science Council meeting on Mars. It would be the first time either of them had left Unity Prime Station. I cannot go, Zarathul said when the invitation arrived. I have never appeared in public. What will people think when they see me? They'll think you're brilliant, Jake said. Because you are. But my chair, my legs. Your chair is part of who you are, and your ideas are going to change everything. 2 days before they were supposed to leave, Lord Vexthul arrived unannounced at the station. Jake was not there when the guards came for Zarathul, but he returned to find his quarters empty and a message waiting. Your daughter has been retrieved, the message said. She will not be embarrassing our family any further. Jake stared at the empty workspace they had shared. Tools lay scattered where she had been working moments before. Her chair was gone, but the smell of her skin treatment still lingered in the air. For the first time in weeks, the quarters felt truly empty. Jake realized that somewhere along the way, Zarathul had stopped being his responsibility and had become his partner, maybe even his friend. He looked at the invitation to Mars, then at the prototype engine still glowing softly on the workbench. Lord Vexthul thought he could just take her back and pretend none of this had happened. He was very wrong. Jake knocked on Captain Turner's door with his fist, not caring if he looked angry. When she opened it, he pushed past her into her office. They took her, he said, his voice shaking. Vexthul just took Zarathul back like she was property. Captain Turner closed the door and sat down. Jake, I know you're upset, but legally speaking, she is his daughter. We have no right to keep her here. She didn't want to go. This was her work too. We were supposed to present together on Mars. I understand, but there's nothing I can do. Lord Vexthul has diplomatic immunity. Jake stared at her. So that's it? She's trapped again, and all our work means nothing. The work still matters, Jake. You can still make the presentation. No, Jake said firmly. I won't do it without her. 2 hours later, Jake was in the shuttle bay loading his tools when Zarathil appeared. She looked different. Instead of her usual simple clothes, she wore a formal Caltheran dress that covered her legs completely. Her hover chair had been replaced with an older, simpler version that barely lifted her off the ground. Jake, she called out. Wait. He ran to her. Zara, are you okay? How did you get away? I did not escape. My father is here. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder. I convinced him to let me come with you to Mars. How? I told him that if I do not present the research myself, the other nobles will think he stole it from you. That would be even more embarrassing than having a disabled daughter. Lord Vexthul appeared with his guards. He looked like he had eaten something sour. Human, my daughter will accompany you to this foolish presentation. But understand this. She represents our family now. Any shame she brings will fall on you as well. I understand, Jake said, though he wanted to say much more. The journey to Mars took 3 days. Zarathil spent most of the time in her quarters preparing for the presentation. When Jake knocked on her door, he found her surrounded by holographic displays showing their engine design from every angle. Are you ready for this? He asked. I am terrified, she admitted. I have never spoken to strangers before. What if they cannot understand my words? What if they think I am as broken as my father does? Zara, you're the smartest person I've ever met. Your ideas will speak for themselves. The day of the presentation, the main hall of the Mars Science Center was packed. Representatives from dozens of species filled the seats. Jake had never seen so many different kinds of beings in one place. When their names were called, Jake walked to the stage confidently. Zarathil followed, her old hover chair making a grinding noise that seemed loud in the quiet hall. Some in the audience whispered when they saw her. Jake began the presentation, explaining the basic principles of their engine. But when he reached the complex mathematics, he stepped aside. The theoretical framework was developed by my partner, Zarathil of Calthera. Zarathil moved forward. For a moment, she just stared at the audience. Then she began to speak. She explained her equations with a clarity that made even the most difficult concepts seem simple. She answered questions from the audience with patience and precision. When a Regelian scientist challenged her mathematics, she worked through the proof step by step on the holographic display. The room fell silent when she finished. Then, slowly, the applause began. First from the humans, then spreading through the entire audience. Even some of the Caltheran delegates were clapping. Jake looked at the Caltheran section and saw Lord Vexthul. The noble's skin had turned very pale, and he was not clapping. But the other Caltherans around him were whispering excitedly. After the presentation, they were surrounded by scientists wanting to know more. One elderly human professor shook Zarathil's hand and said, "Young lady, you may have just changed the future of space travel." Zarathil looked at Jake, her skin bright purple with pride. For the first time since he had met her, she looked truly happy. But Jake noticed Lord Vexthul talking angrily with other Caltheran nobles. This success would bring new challenges, he was sure of it. The trouble started 2 weeks after the presentation. Jake was working in the lab when Captain Turner burst in, holding a legal tablet that glowed with official seals. "Jake, we have a problem. The Caltheran Empire is claiming ownership of your engine design." Jake's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "They're saying that since Zarathil is a Caltheran citizen and daughter of a noble, any work she does belongs to her family and the Empire. They want all research data turned over immediately." Zarathil, who had been quietly working at her station, looked up with fear in her yellow eyes. "They cannot do this. This is our work." "Legally, it's complicated," Turner said. "Caltheran law is different from human law, and Lord Vexthul has a lot of political power." Jake clenched his fists. "So they let us do all the work, then steal it when we succeed. Before Turner could answer, the lab doors opened. Lord Vexthul entered with 6 guards and an official-looking Caltheran carrying a scroll. "Daughter," Vexthul said coldly, "you will come with me now. Your childish games are over." "I will not," Zarethul said, her voice shaking but firm. "This is my work, my choice." Vexthul's skin turned dark purple with anger. "You forget yourself. You are property. Everything you create belongs to our house." "I am not property," Zarethul said, moving her chair between Jake and her father. "I am a person, and I choose to stay here." The official Caltheran stepped forward. "By order of the Caltheran High Council, all research related to gravitational manipulation developed by Zarethul, daughter of Vexthul, must be surrendered to the Empire." Jake stepped forward. "That research was developed together. It's as much mine as hers." "You are human," Vexthul spat. "You can create nothing of value. My daughter's superior mind did all the real work." "That's not true," Jake said. "We worked as partners." Vexthul laughed. "Show me your proof. Show me one document that proves you contributed anything meaningful." Jake's heart sank. All their work had been informal. They had not fought to document who did what. In their excitement to create, they had just focused on the science. But then Zarethul spoke up. "I have proof." She activated her personal computer and showed recordings of their work sessions, videos of Jake building prototypes while she guided him, audio files of their discussions, detailed notes showing how Jake's practical engineering combined with her mathematical theories. "You recorded everything?" Jake asked, surprised. "I learned to be careful with evidence," she said quietly. "In my father's house, you must always prove your worth." The official Caltheran reviewed the files, his expression growing troubled. According to Caltheran law, collaborative work could not be claimed entirely by one party. Lord Vexthul was furious. "These recordings prove nothing. My daughter was merely teaching this human our superior methods." "The recordings showed true collaboration," the official said carefully. "By our own laws, this complicates the ownership claims." Over the following days, more allies appeared. Dr. Martinez, a human lawyer specializing in interspecies law, offered to help for free. Several alien scientists who had attended the Mars presentation spoke out in support of Jake and Zarethul. But the most unexpected support came from other Caltherans. Hidden away on their homeworld were dozens of disabled individuals who had seen Zarethul's presentation. For the first time, they had seen one of their own treated with respect and achieving great things. "My nephew was born without arms," one Caltheran noble said in a recorded message. "He has brilliant ideas, but no one listens because of his disability. Zarethul shows us what we are wasting." The legal battle dragged on for months. Jake and Zarethul used the time to develop new technologies based on their engine design. They created better hover chairs, improved medical devices, and systems to help disabled beings of all species work more effectively. "We are not just fighting for our engine," Zarethul said one evening as they worked late in the lab. "We are fighting for the right of disabled beings everywhere to be valued for their minds, not judged by their bodies." Jake looked at the dozens of support messages they had received from across the galaxy. "You know what? I think we're winning something bigger than a legal case." Zarethul smiled, her first real smile since the legal trouble began. "We are winning the right to exist as equals." Outside, Lord Vexthul's political support was slowly crumbling as more Caltherans began to question why they had hidden away so many brilliant minds. 6 months after the legal battle began, everything changed. The Interspecies Court ruled that Jake and Zarethul owned their invention together. The Caltheran Empire could not claim something that was created through equal partnership. But Zarethul had bigger plans than just winning a court case. "Jake," she said one morning, "I want to start something new." "What kind of something?" "A center. A place where disabled beings from all species can come to develop technology. To prove that broken bodies do not mean broken minds." Jake looked at the small lab they shared. "That sounds expensive." The patent royalties from our engine will fund it. Companies across the galaxy want to license our technology. We will have more money than we know what to do with. Within a year, the Institute for Adaptive Innovation opened on a neutral space station near the Galactic Center. Beings came from everywhere. A Rigelian who had lost his tentacles in an accident designed new medical scanners. A human woman born without arms created art using mind control tools. A Caltheran with damaged hearing developed better translation devices. Zerethal became the public face of the Institute. She gave speeches to governments and universities. She wrote articles that were translated into dozens of languages. The media started calling her the voice of the forgotten. Jake remained her closest friend and collaborator, but he was amazed by her transformation. The shy, scared young woman who had arrived at his quarters had become a confident leader. "You have changed so much," he told her one day. "No," she said, "I am the same person I always was. I just finally have the chance to show it." The Institute's first major success came when they developed a new type of prosthetic limb. Unlike old prosthetics that just replaced function, these enhanced the user's natural abilities. A human soldier who had lost his legs could now run faster than before. A Caltheran artist with damaged hands could create more detailed work than ever. The technology spread quickly. Soon, being disabled was not seen as a limitation, but as an opportunity to be better than before. Lord Vexthul watched his daughter's success from afar, and his anger grew. He tried to have her declared mentally ill and unfit to manage her affairs. The courts rejected his claims. He attempted to have her citizenship revoked. The Caltheran government, under pressure from their own disabled citizens, refused. "She is making a mockery of our traditions," he complained to anyone who would listen. But fewer and fewer nobles listened. Many had family members with disabilities who had been inspired by Zerathal's work. The old ways of hiding disabled individuals were crumbling. Zerathal's influence reached its peak when she was invited to address the Galactic Assembly. Standing before representatives of every known species, she spoke about dignity, potential, and the waste of hiding brilliant minds because of physical differences. "For too long," she said, "we have judged worth by the wholeness of bodies rather than the power of minds. We have thrown away innovations, discoveries, and wisdom because we could not see past what was different." The speech was broadcast across the galaxy. On hundreds of worlds, disabled beings who had been kept hidden suddenly found themselves valued for their ideas. Jake watched from the audience, proud beyond words. He remembered the bitter, frightened young woman who had been dumped in his quarters as a joke. That person was gone, replaced by someone who had changed the galaxy's understanding of ability and worth. After the speech, reporters swarmed around them. One asked Jake how it felt to be known as the man who discovered Zerathal's genius. "I didn't discover anything," Jake said. "I just treated her like the brilliant person she always was. The galaxy did the rest." Zerathal squeezed his hand. "Some discoveries are made in laboratories. Others are made when someone sees potential where others see problems." That night, as they celebrated with friends from the Institute, Jake realized that Lord Vexthul's cruel joke had created something beautiful. Not just a friendship or a business partnership, but a movement that was reshaping how countless beings saw themselves. The icon was complete, but her work was just beginning. 3 years after the Galactic Assembly speech, Zerathal had become more than just an inventor or activist. She was a symbol of hope for billions of beings across the galaxy. Her latest project excited her the most. Working with Jake and a team of engineers, she had designed a new generation of mobility suits that could adapt to any species and any type of disability. The suits did not just replace lost function. They enhanced the wearer beyond natural limits. "Show them the new prototype," Jake said as reporters gathered in their lab. Zerathal activated her newest mobility suit, the sleek device wrapped around her body like liquid metal. When she stood up from her chair, her legs supported her weight perfectly. But then she did something impossible. She jumped 6 feet in the air and landed softly. "The suit learns from the user," she explained to the amazed reporters. It becomes stronger as you use it. A person who lost their vision gains enhanced hearing and spatial awareness. Someone missing limbs gets mechanical replacements that are stronger and more precise than biological ones. The suits were manufactured across the galaxy and given away for free. The Institute's patents had made them rich enough to help anyone who needed it. But Zarathol's influence went far beyond technology. She had written 3 books about disability, dignity, and potential. Her essays were required reading in schools across dozens of worlds. Children grew up learning that differences were not flaws but opportunities. On Calthera, the changes were most dramatic. The planet that had once hidden its disabled citizens now celebrated them. Zarathol's younger cousin, born with only one arm, had just been accepted into the most prestigious engineering program on the planet. "My father calls every week now," Zarathol told Jake one evening as they worked late in the lab. "He wants to reconcile." "How do you feel about that?" "Confused. Part of me wants to forgive him. But another part remembers years of being told I was worthless." Jake understood. Some wounds take time to heal, even when the person who caused them finally realizes they were wrong. The breakthrough moment came when Lord Vexthul appeared at the Institute unannounced. Jake found him standing in the main laboratory, staring at a wall covered with pictures of successful graduates. "She has done all this?" Vexthul asked quietly. "We did it together," Jake corrected. "But yes, she led it." When Zarathol arrived, father and daughter stared at each other for a long moment. Vexthul looked older, his proud posture bent with age and regret. "I came to apologize," he said finally. "I was wrong. About everything." "You were," Zarathol agreed. "But you gave me to Jake as a punishment, and it became the best thing that ever happened to me. I lost my daughter because I was ashamed of her," Vexthul said. "Now I learn that she has become the most honored Caltheran in generations, and I had nothing to do with it." "You could have something to do with what happens next," Zarathol offered carefully. Over the following months, Lord Vexthul became an unlikely ally. He used his remaining political influence to support disability rights legislation on Calthera. He funded scholarships for disabled students. Most importantly, he publicly apologized for his past actions and urged other nobles to embrace family members they had hidden away. Jake watched this transformation with amazement. "Do you think he really changed, or is he just trying to get close to your success?" "Maybe both," Zarathol said. "But if his reasons help other disabled beings, does it matter why he does it?" The Institute continued to grow. They opened branches on 50 worlds. Their technologies had helped millions of beings live fuller lives. But perhaps their greatest success was changing minds. In schools, children learned about Zarathol and Jake's partnership as an example of how different people working together could achieve amazing things. The story of the disabled princess and the human engineer had become legend. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if your father had not given you to me," Jake said one day. Zarathol smiled. "Then some other disabled person would have changed the galaxy. We were just the ones who got the chance." The icon had become eternal, not through her own achievements alone, but through the mind she had opened and the barriers she had torn down. 20 years had passed since Jake Martinez first met Zarathol in his small quarters on Unity Prime. Now he stood in the grand ceremonial hall of the Galactic Council, watching as they unveiled a statue in her honor. The statue showed Zarathol in her original hover chair, but rising above it was a holographic display of all the lives her work had touched. Millions of faces from hundreds of species flickered in the light, each one representing someone whose life had been changed by her innovations and advocacy. "She would have hated this," Jake said to Captain Turner, who now served as the Institute's administrator. "No," Turner replied. "She would have said the statue should include you too." Jake smiled. Zarathol had died peacefully 2 years ago, still working on new designs to help disabled beings. Her last invention was a neural interface that allowed people with paralyzed vocal cords to speak through thought alone. She had tested it on herself in her final weeks, making sure her voice could be heard even when her body failed. The ceremony was attended by leaders from every major world. The current Caltheran Emperor, Vexthol's nephew, spoke about how his planet had completely transformed its treatment of disabled citizens. 20 years ago, we hid our disabled children in shame, he said. Today, they are our teachers, our inventors, our leaders. Zarathul showed us that what we called broken was simply different, and different can be beautiful. After the ceremony, Jake walked through the Institute's museum. The building now covered an entire asteroid, with research labs, living quarters, and educational centers. Students from across the galaxy came here to learn and create. He stopped at his favorite exhibit, a recreation of their first workshop on Unity Prime. Everything was exactly as it had been. The small desk, the basic tools, the prototype of their first gravity engine still glowing softly in its case. A young human student approached him. She wore one of the latest mobility suits, her legs having been damaged in an accident. "Mr. Martinez, I'm Sarah. I'm studying your early work with Miss Zarathul. What do you want to know? How did you know she could do all this? When you first met her, did you see what she would become?" Jake thought for a moment. "No, I didn't. I just saw someone who was being treated unfairly. I thought she deserved better. But you changed the galaxy together. We gave people a chance to change themselves. That's all we ever did." The student looked puzzled. "But the history books say you discovered her genius." "The history books are wrong. I didn't discover anything. I just treated her like a person instead of a problem." Jake left the museum and walked to his office. On his desk was a letter from the Regelian Science Academy. They wanted to award him their highest honor for his contributions to adaptive technology. He put the letter aside and picked up a photo of him and Zarathul from their last day working together. She was laughing at something he had said, her mobility suit gleaming in the lab's light. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. A young Caltheran rolled in using a wheelchair of his own design. His legs were missing, but his eyes were bright with excitement. "Mr. Martinez, I have an idea for a new type of engine. One that could work in both atmosphere and space. Would you like to see?" Jake smiled and gestured to the chair across from his desk. "I'd love to see it. What's your name?" "Kreshtal. I'm from Calthera. My family used to hide me because of my disability. But when I saw Zarathul's story, everything changed." As Kreshtal began explaining his designs, Jake felt the familiar excitement of discovery. The boy's ideas were brilliant, revolutionary even. "Have you tested any of this?" Jake asked. "Only in simulations. I need someone to help me build a prototype." Jake looked at the young Caltheran, seeing echoes of Zarathul in his eagerness and intelligence. "Well then," he said, "let's get to work." Outside his window, the statue of Zarathul gleamed in the light of distant stars. But her real monument was not made of metal and stone. It was in every disabled person who now lived with dignity, every invention that made life better, every child who grew up believing that being different was not being less. Lord Vexthol's joke had become the galaxy's greatest gift, and the work continued.